we acknowledge the traditional custodians on the land on which we are recording this podcast before Poets for Palestine, and acknowledge the Bunurong, Boonwurrung and the Wurundjeri Woi-wurrung peoples of the Eastern Kulin Nations as the traditional custodians on the land on which we are recording. We recognise the past atrocities against Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples of this land, and that Australia was founded on the genocide and dispossession of First Nations people. We pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging. Sovereignty has never been ceded. It always was and always will be Aboriginal land. Amen. I said this last time and I'll say it again. Every time an acknowledgement of country is said, I feel like it should be a prayer, like it should be ended with an amen.
I think if it was a mantra, then maybe it'll like sink into this country's head. That,
a little bit more?
Yeah.
Because I feel like it is somewhat sacred. Like if we're giving an acknowledgement and recognition, it's not a tick and flick like I see in corporate spaces. Like we sincerely mean it. We acknowledge that we're settlers. We're benefiting from stolen land.
Yeah. I especially like the ones where people actually do like they kind of contextualize it for like whatever it is, whether it's poetry and they talk about the storytellers or the context of its artists and they talk about the type of art that Indigenous people might have made on this land and yeah, the context of that. And then I think one of my first workplaces, they would get everyone to just kind of observe 30 seconds of silence and think about what the Indigenous people might have done on this exact land where we're standing right now and just maybe picture it almost like meditatively.
I actually love that.
I love that too.
I love that idea, especially in the context of the fact that the atrocities they went through were actually wild and we had no technology, no live streaming, social media. A lot of it went under the radar and was unrecorded or undocumented. And now we're knowing, like now we know better.
And they still take it so gracefully.
Yeah.
It is shocking to me.
Yep.
Never have I lived on a land, and I was saying this to a friend on the phone today. I was like, it's only dawned on me recently. I've never lived on a land that has been colonized land where it's still being run by the colonizers. And this is the first time I'm experiencing that because I've never lived in the UK. I've never lived in the US. It's always been like the Middle East or in India or something. Like it's always, and so seeing that here and seeing how they coexist, it's like I do not truly understand how the Indigenous people have so much grace in the way they handle it rather than hate.
They definitely have a lot of grace, but I think calling it coexistence is a stretch considering,
totally.
You know, how they are still treated, you know, the overrepresentation in incarceration. Northern Territory's record is atrocious. South Australia doesn't have the best one following in terms of detention, incarceration, the way that they treat children, Indigenous children.
Yeah.
As criminals. Coexistence is a stretch. And the fact that they have that much grace, given everything that we continue to put them through, is wild.
Yeah.
And I think also on the point of this being a colonized land that is still run by the colonizers is actually an excellent segue, because really when we're talking about Israel and you talk about their biggest allies, they are colonial and imperial allies, like their powers. And it's quite deliberate.
It's deliberate and it's barbaric and it's enforced, but it's also supported. It is supported by, and like let's be honest about this, like they wouldn't be anywhere today if it wasn't for the support of all of the other governments, especially
the imperialist
America.
Powers.
Imperialist.
And when you look at the list of countries that have refused to recognize Palestine as a state, that have designated Hamas as a terrorist organization, there's a consistency there. They're the same powers. They're the same imperialist, colonialist powers. And backing Israel as well is also in a way of upholding the current systems of oppression.
Yeah.
Because should Israel fall, should we decolonize Israel and give Palestinians freedom and right to return and that equity of existence, it will completely undermine those powers because it would dismantle their societies.
Yeah,
like imagine
100%.
in Australia, like what would happen?
Genuine question.
Yeah.
What does Australia have to do with the historical decision of Israel starting to exist? Like, had they had any involvement? Because from my point of view, all I know from the research I've done is that at the time that the Jewish people were looking to settle in a land, Australia was apparently even up for discussion. They were considering Australia to settle in.
I didn't know Australia was one of the options.
Yeah.
I thought, not Argentina. Is it Argentina?
Yeah, Argentina.
Argentina, they've got a large Jewish population.
Yeah.
Palestine, and it's either Uganda or Uruguay. I think Uganda. And at the time, the reason why Uganda was dismissed was because the white colonialists that were living there at the time, the white settlers at the time, said no. Not
the irony.
Not the indigenous people. The white people, the settlers, said no.
Yeah, okay.
And so this is the first time hearing potentially Australia was an option.
Well, do you remember a while ago there was that, like, what, for lack of a better term, a meme that was going around, which was like contextualizing
the
some
takeover.
Parts of like
so it was a visual
Coburg
representation.
or in Melbourne being like, all of you have to leave right now because like we're going to come move into your land. That sparked a discussion. Well, obviously people were trying to like bring it close to home and stop the whole argument of not in my backyard, because it was like, what if it was in your backyard?
Yes.
But that sparked a discussion, therefore, and an investigation of people going like, actually, historically, Australia was being considered as a place to let the Jewish people settle.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
And that's, if it is true, I do need to fact check it. If it is true, how that would have worked is beyond me, because at that point, Australia was well and truly established as a colony. Like, we're talking
did
about...
they get involved? Back then, like
they were involved in the war, like World War II, and they definitely were involved in World War I. But I don't believe they had an involvement in the partitioning of Greater Syria, like Bilad al-Sham, of the Levantine region. That was the Balfour Declaration. That was very much the British and the French came in, and were like divvying it up amongst themselves, like the greedy powers that they were, and having their way with the land that they actually had no right to claim. But and at that point, the British had promised the land of Palestine to the Jewish people. And this predates World War II. So even the narrative of a Jewish homeland for safety post that persecution of World War II.
Yeah, and the Palestinian people opening their doors.
Yeah.
It was like, no, the British people were playing a game of risk. And like moving soldiers around and being like, hello, okay, yeah, this looks safe. We'll just let them move in here. What could go wrong?
Yeah. But bringing it closer to home, in a slight shift of conversation, I don't know if you've heard of this term before, PEP, P-E-P?
No.
Progressive Except for Palestine.
Uh-huh.
This is my biggest struggle. And it's funny because I was talking to a friend about this a couple nights ago, about how sometimes good people, sincerely good people that are generous, hospitable, like great sense of humor, can still have very fucked views.
Yep.
Because we know those people. We have those people in our lives where we get confronted with, oh, whoa, like, okay, that's very misguided. I thought you were a decent human.
Yeah.
So my friend that I was having this conversation with said, I would prefer an out and out bigot over, you know, that person in corporate, that colleague in corporate that has those microaggressions or those internalized attitudes, who's super lovely, is the one that brings cake to the office, is the one that remembers your birthday.
Is the one that has a rainbow lanyard.
Has a rainbow lanyard.
Is the one who's got a gay son that, you know, is the one who discovered they have a gay son and helped them come out to the family.
Yep.
Is also the one who's like, but I'm not sure if I sit on the side of genocide.
Yeah. Or will turn around and make like microaggressive comments to me about, like, for example, when I was like visibly Muslim, commentary around my dad or my brothers. Were they okay with certain decisions I've made in my life? That would come up a lot. And I'd say, you know, there's only one line of thinking that leads you to ask questions like that. Like you've deeply internalized this view, this Islamophobic view, or this bigoted view of, you know, women, Muslim women or Arab women. So it's been coming up a lot because this current saga, because we remind everyone this didn't start on October 7th.
Nope.
But the current iteration of the saga has really shone a light on a lot of people in our lives and has really shown the true colours of a lot of people. And it's given the term PEP has come up again. So this is something I don't know where exactly it was coined. I've mostly heard it in American contexts. I've never heard it here in Australia.
Is it a recent thing that has...
No, it's actually been a term that's been used for a little bit.
Okay.
But this current iteration, it's come up again, especially because of like the progressives, quote unquote progressives, or the staunchly leftist politicians or public speakers or public personalities that have come out against Palestine. That have come out not showing support, that have come out backing, you know, the misnomer around anti-Semitism, you know, not a single call out of the actual violent Islamophobia that Arabs and Muslims across Australia and the UK and the US are actively experiencing, let alone the active genocide that's happening in Palestine. So
well, if they hide behind all of the other things, which is like, and this is the most successful right-wing argument in a lot of cases, and also in this one, is to, instead of address, to distract and to then say, no, hold on. I'm not talking about whether Palestine deserves to exist as a sovereign state. I'm not talking about whether the killing of women and children is right. Of course it's wrong. I'm also talking about what happened on October 7th. I'm also talking about anti-Semitism. I'm also talking about the Nazi symbol that got painted on my son's school wall. Right? It is victim, play the victim, distract, big white tears.
Yes, very big white tears.
They're so good at it.
Very good at it. So it's been...
but how do you deal with... I think it would be...
I put PEPs...
You don't know how... Yeah, PEP. How do you deal with progressive accept Palestine?
I put PEPs in the same... This is me. Strictly me. I put PEPs in the same basket as liberal Zionists.
Right? Say more.
So liberal Zionists are usually folks that they have progressive politics or socially progressive views, you know, around LGBTQ, around, you know, healthcare, you know, women's rights, the right to choose, things like that. However, they still identify as Zionists. They still believe that Israel is the homeland for the Jewish people. And they still believe in that it was a land without a people for a people without a land, which, as we know, is not true.
It's just bullshit. It's just this thing. I was watching
modern day
an interview.
Really.
Yeah, 100%. I was watching an interview yesterday. And it was a beautiful TED talk between an Israeli man and a Palestinian man.
Tell me more.
And they've both lost, and they're having a conversation in front of a stage of people, and they've both lost people. And the Palestinian man is friends. He's from Gaza and he's friends with this Israeli man, and the Israeli man says, "You called me on October 7th, and gave me your condolences." And the Israeli man lost 3 or 4 of his family members, and he said, even in the heat of his grief, his friend, the Israeli man, to him said, I just really don't want to be used as an excuse, nor people like me to be used as an excuse to start a violent war.
Which is what inevitably happened.
100%. But to be able to see that in the height of your anger is truly incredible. And then the reverse happened because, of course, 2 weeks, 3 weeks later, the Palestinian man lost a lot of family members and friends from Gaza and West Bank and around that area. Even in Israel, he lost his family and friends. And the same thing, his friend called to check on him. And they just had this beautiful, open discussion about how things can happen and bad people can do bad things.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to mean that we all have to pick a side. And if we're not on side with whatever government or whatever the side of our enemy is doing, it means we're siding with the right. It doesn't have to be like that.
Yeah, it's because we constantly function with everything in life in false binaries and false dichotomies.
100%.
We draw this on ourselves because we are very linear, very black and white people, and we struggle to think in a nuanced way. We struggle to do the and also. We struggle to carry 2 truths at once.
Yep.
So I think that's one of the main challenges with this, especially when we're talking about the pro-Palestinian movement, and we're talking about calling out the rights of Palestinians and their right to self-determination, their right to return, et cetera, and that oftentimes getting hijacked by a narrative around, oh, well, you're anti-Semitic or you don't like Jews or this or that or that. It's like me saying this, me having this stance does not mean
that I'm in
any way.
that I hate all Jewish people.
Yeah, and I
reserve-
personally, I've made this abundantly clear, and I've had this conversation actually with someone in my life. I use that word loosely. We're not very close, but someone in my life that is actually Jewish.
I do, yeah.
They come from a Zionist family.
Yeah.
And I can tell that they're a movable middle. So I would classify them more as like a liberal Zionist right now, but I can tell that it's because of the space that they're in. And it's very hard to reconcile very confronting ideas if you've been raised, especially if you look at literally how they're raised with these ideologies and
with
how they're
children's
told
books and people signing missiles and God knows what.
They're
so
explicitly
exposed,
told time and time again that Judaism is Zionism, Zionism is Judaism, and to be a Jew is to be a Zionist.
And is to fight for your land, and if you don't, then you have no backbone and you are
so
betraying your
that is
society.
confronting to undo, and I have the greatest empathy for someone that is on that journey.
So
I
much.
sincerely do.
They get totally, like, there's been people talking about it on TikTok about people who are being ostracized by their rabbi, by their community, by their family and their friends. They're not invited to Sabbath anymore.
Yep.
They get completely, coined as an anti-Semitic Jewish.
Or self-hating Jew.
Or self-hating Jew,
And it's terrible. It's ostracizing. So I can see why that would be really confronting. So with this person specifically, I said to them, because they were telling me about how they want to be proud of their faith. They want to be proud to wear the Star of David. They want to be proud to lean into their culture. And I said, you can and you should. And I think it's a great injustice. We are both victims of the same mechanisms. It's a great injustice to both of us that the Israeli government has gone above and beyond in their PR to make sure that to be anti-Zionist or to be, to be anti-Zionist is to be anti-Semitic, and to be Zionist is to be Jewish, and to be Jewish is to be Zionist. Like, they've gone above and beyond
to make sure
to
that
conflate
narrative. Yes, you're right. You're so right.
and to
convolute
marry them.
it. And
To the point where people struggle with that nuance and that distinction and that differentiation. And I could see that it was making her uncomfortable. I was extremely gentle, but I said to her, I love the Jewish faith.
Yeah.
I love Jewish people. I know a fair bit about the Jewish faith just by virtue of being Muslim, because we learn about it by being Muslim.
But also it's not that different.
It's not that different. We have more in common. Muslims have more in common with Jews than we do with Christians.
Yeah.
Literally, ideologically, even our rituals, even our what's permissible and not permissible.
And
there's
also
so much
in
overlap.
the way that the religion is very cultural.
Yes, it is. It's communal. It's cultural. And the thing is, and this is such a cliche and such a trope, and a lot of people use it, but it's true because we were living side by side for centuries. The Jews that were from the region never left.
Yeah.
They never left. They were always there. There's stories, there's prophetic stories of, the Jews as neighbors to the literal prophet.
Yeah.
Peace and blessings be upon him. And just throwing that out there. So I could see that was making her uncomfortable. And I said to her, I am anti-Zionist, but I'm not anti-Jewish. And I have the utmost respect for Jewish people and the Jewish faith. And I would never, desecrate the Star of David or ever harbor any kind of feelings towards you purely because you are Jewish. But if you identify as Zionist, it's a different conversation.
Oh, 100%. It's a different conversation. And I think when this started for me in Australia, which was like in October, that's when the conversations were starting to come up in my friend groups and my workplaces. I think I thought it was a difficult conversation. When people are sitting on the side of, especially when they're Jewish people and they are like, well, I'm getting pressure. And I think that it is a complicated issue. And I was like, okay, well, hold your thought, Shai. Hold it. You don't have to constantly force everyone's opinion to be the same. And then I went away and I watched what was happening in real time in front of us, having a front row seat for the first time in history, really, to this much of what was going on to this extent. And
which is why Sudan and the Congo aren't on the radar, because they've got a massive media blackout. Sorry to digress. But,
no, you're totally
right. But it's literally exactly
Yeah.
why it's on everyone, why a lot of people are talking about Palestine is
because of this, right?
Yes.
And that's why they tried to, this is why helping with donating Palestinian SIMs and also the government internet blackout, they realize that they're getting the public sympathy, they're getting people to be on their side because of what's going on, right?
Yeah.
Because they have access to the internet, because they're access to media, or they're creating their own access to media, which is brilliant. But going back to how I felt about it, and going back to progressive what was it?
Except for Palestine.
Except for Palestine. I was trying to be open-minded about, I was like, well, don't be a hard leftist. Politics, it gets in the way. People throw these big terms at you. You kind of like end up gaslighting yourself.
Yeah.
And then a month into it, I think my first poem into it, when I really sat in and got into my feelings and like really like went on a deep dive, looked at what was happening, went to my first few rallies, I just was heartbroken. And it was like, well, you would never consider being friends with someone who is, forget even like, do you want to say this issue is not in my backyard? Fine, it's not. But neither is being a trans person.
Yeah.
And I would never befriend a transphobic person.
Yes.
So why would I befriend a Zionist person?
Correct. Yes.
Who believes in genocide?
Yes.
This issue is not any different. This is what I keep trying to explain to friends and myself sometimes.
Yep.
It is not any different to someone who is homophobic or someone who is a misogynist.
Yep.
It is not any different to all of those things.
Agreed.
Because if you cannot find it in your heart to keep someone in your life who is publicly a misogynist, publicly homophobic, publicly transphobic, publicly racist against your black friends,
Yep.
then why is this acceptable?
Yes, exactly. And the same people that were out about the vote, the referendum last year, The Voice, the same people that were posting, I am going to be voting yes, I am proud to be on the side of yes, and the Yes campaign and all these organizations that came out with yes, and then suddenly to talk about Palestine is political and we don't get political. So that referendum was not political.
Yeah.
And that referendum was palatable to you, and that conversation about Indigenous rights, because we were giving them breadcrumbs. Let's be real, The Voice was barely anything.
100%. And even then, it was everyone publicly saying yes, while the government and the people and actually in Parliament were like, let's throw 100 mixed messages.
Yep.
So nobody knows what to do. And the no people are so sure they're going to stay in the no camp.
Yep.
And the yes people are going to be maybe people.
Yes. And then
But
you
now
left
where there's
with?
people now?
What are you left
and
with?
even
Yep.
the people even my people in my friend group on my workplaces who said I voted no or I chose not to vote because I didn't know and my Indigenous friends told me not to, or I spoke to a homeless person on the street who was an Aboriginal man and he said he doesn't, so, and like, or people who said I didn't know which side to go so I just didn't vote. I'm like, well, where is your voice now on Palestine?
Yep.
You were a fence sitter then. Are you going to be a fence sitter now? Are you only going to join liberal politics when it's fun and comes with a rainbow flag, lots of alcohol, and a parade?
Yes.
Is that it?
Is that when it's convenient, when it's
fun for you.
comfortable, and it's fun,
and it's trendy, and it's kitschy,
and it's got an excellent marketing campaign with lots of colors, and it's like I really do struggle with that when I see people that are quote unquote liberal, quote unquote progressive, and have these kinds of politics. But then when it comes to Palestine, like the buck stops at that point. And for me, as someone with proximity to the situation, like being from the south of Lebanon, who has actually undergone Israeli occupation, military occupation, I have lived experiences of that Israeli occupation. But it's literally a live example, like demonstrated behavior of the expansionist colonialist project that is Israel, and people are turning a blind eye. They're literally showing their hand. They're literally showing you their cards. They're telling you what they want to do. They're telling you how far they want to take it, and people are just turning a blind eye. And I don't know what to do with that. And
it's not even like they're talking in circles.
They're
right?
not. They're
like there's
if you look at the
literal
top-
videos on Al Jazeera, on
yes.
YouTube, on everything, all the deep dives that I have done of Netanyahu and his or the Israeli defense minister in the US, everyone sitting there and being like, this is what we're gonna do. We're gonna attack them. We're gonna go through here. Oh, and someone in the room goes, but what about civilians? What about the babies? And he goes, well, they're gonna grow up to be monsters anyway. We're just killing a future terrorist. And I was like, this rhetoric is public.
Yep.
And we are watching this rhetoric publicly. And we are what is the point?
But it actually, as infuriating as that is, you know what terrifies me even more?
What?
Is if we didn't know about this, if it wasn't so public and so not televised, but like splashed all over social media and media outlets, etc. Imagine if it wasn't how far they would go and what they would be doing. Not to say like,
well, grimly, I think it would have been over by now.
Well,
like in the worst way
in the
possible.
worst possible way. Yes, they would have achieved what they've been trying to do and what they are still trying to do. So that thought occurred to me not too long ago because of an Instagram post. Actually, this woman I follow, I forget her name. Brilliant. I think she's from the US. I just love how she speaks. And the way she breaks down, language and rhetoric and just, has excellent perspective all the time. And she pointed that out. She's like, even in the darkest of moment and as much as you lose hope and when you're seeing these images of, literally blown up babies and, just the massacres that are happening, think what they would have done if no one was watching.
Yeah.
Did you goosebumps?
Yeah.
Did you get goosebumps? I rewatched that. It was the shortest reel that she had posted. It wasn't even like a 30-second reel on Instagram. And I rewatched it multiple times in one sitting because I was like, holy shit.
But the way in which it makes me feel like we are
doomed either way.
We are doomed, like, or the world is truly demented is the way that makes us feel lucky. Do you know what I mean? Like word. It's so
But the fact that it gives perspective, the fact that it gives pause and perspective, like thank God we have footage, we have actual footage of the little things that they're doing.
It's a false choice.
Yeah, and we're still being gaslit.
At least they're not. It's every form of abuse we've ever seen on a mass scale,
on a systematic, industrialized scale, with the backing of wild powers. Yeah, it's wild. It's wild.
It is crazy to me that as I keep going through these and trying to find out more information and educating myself on the situation.
And it's a never-ending well, by the way. It just doesn't. It's the gift that keeps on giving.
It is 100%.
When you're educating yourself on this.
Do you think it is more impactful, or maybe it's just like at this point we're just throwing everything at the wall and seeing what sticks? Do you think it's more impactful to hone in and show like the story of one person or one family and kind of personalize or contextualize the issue and show that these are civilians and real people with real lives and real stories, or on a bigger scale, like, look, this is the massacre. Here's like a bird's eye view of like the torn land and like the burning buildings and bodies under rubbles. Because personally, to me, whenever I watch like a documentary or a video or something on the news about, like we were just talking about this earlier, about like the little 6-year-old girl Hind, that is just, it breaks me. That is where it just it's when it hones in and zooms all the way into a macro level.
Yep.
And
is
where it kills me. Or micro level.
Yeah, micro, like super, like zoomed in.
Yeah.
Very specific, very humanizing. With that one, I struggle because it's all of the above and none of the above, because they've literally been showing us they're dead. No hold bar, no censoring. They've literally been showing the world they're dead, and it hasn't been enough. I don't know what will be enough. I don't know what's more impactful. But in saying that, to come full circle, the purpose of tonight, Poets for Palestine, this is the third iteration, which is terrible that we are still going and that we had the certainty of planning this, that it will still be needed. We're raising funds for the Para Foundation, Palestine Australian Relief and Action Foundation. I think that last word was action. Or Advocacy Foundation. Advocacy Foundation. Founded by and run by Palestinian Australians.
And it helps
supporting newly arrived Gazans to reach their full potential while they are here in Australia on visas, humanitarian visas that are extremely limited with regards to they're not allowed to work. I don't know how. I honestly don't know how they're living and eating and fun, like supporting. I don't know, but that's the purpose of Para, and they've been doing remarkable work. So I'm really grateful that the team has pivoted and that the people showing up tonight are going to be throwing their support behind Para. And in that as well, before, we're going to come together as community. We're going to grieve together. We're going to laugh together. And poetry and art and these nights like this is part of the resistance.
It is. Collective grieving is definitely part of the resistance. And we all
1,000%.
have a safe space to come and hear how everyone feels about it and cry our hearts out and do something for the greater good and donate some and hear speakers talk about it and just contextualize everything and realize we're not alone in hanging our heads and feeling this heaviness in our heart. Then it makes us feel, I don't know, less alone in our workplaces.
1,000%.
And when we hear Zionist rhetoric, or when we hear fence sitters, or when we work in places that are PEP. So nights like this is very needed.
Yes.
And thank you to Vibe Union for supporting and facilitating and presenting a night like this 3 times in a row. Passing the mic, so important. And thank you to you for always showing up and doing great work and having a wonderful stage presence.
Lucas talking. I learned from the best.
No, that is not
I'm
true.
very grateful I'm doing this with you. It's
too.
amazing to do it with an ally that also doesn't, like, you have that little bit more capacity than I do about the situation.
Yeah.
And I don't think you've realized how I've needed that. So it's been actually a really great experience despite the circumstances. And yeah, we're not going to be silenced. We're not going to be censored in a life in a current climate where people are actively being censored. They're losing their jobs. They're being doxxed. They're having stern conversations with HR about wearing their keffiyeh to work or about wearing a Palestine badge.
Sticker on their notebook, a badge, anything that they want.
Yeah, in a space, in a climate where that is happening, I'm very grateful that we are here tonight and we will not self-censor. No. So
yeah. So thank you for everyone thank you to everyone for listening. Thank you to everyone who's going to be here tonight. And you are all wonderful. And
shukran. Look after yourselves.
Free Palestine.
Free Palestine. Free Palestine.